Welcome to the Chronicle Sports blog podcast. I'm Scott Rich here with Sabrina Merchant, and today we're going to recap the national semifinals, Duke's victory over West Virginia, as well as Butler's victory over Michigan State, and also preview the national championship game when Duke will take on Butler. So Sabrina, what were your first reactions to Duke's victory last night?
Well, Duke played about as well as they have all season in defeating West Virginia yesterday, and you can talk all you want about Duke's litany of big men. When they hit threes, they're really hard to beat. And Duke shot 13 of 25 from behind the arc yesterday against West Virginia, and really they just had no answer for Duke's offense. And then when Butler went down, that just sent down a spiral. I mean, Duke was already up by 13 when Butler went down, but even then, Butler looked like he was about to get back into the game, and it just spiraled out of control from there.
Yeah, and it was interesting, even though it seemed like Duke's big men really were dominating the game. In reality, the offensive rebounding numbers were, I think, equal or just about equal, and the rebounding numbers in the game, Duke only out-rebounded West Virginia by 2 or 3 rebounds. So that really wasn't the key to the game as much as it's been earlier in the tournament. It really was the big three finally hitting their shots and getting in the flow of the game. But you also can't overlook the fact that Duke's offensive rebounding and the way that the bigs work with the perimeter players really led to a lot of open threes off of those offensive rebounds. And that's something I don't think West Virginia was quite prepared for, because it's really, you can't prepare for that when Brian Zubek knows as soon as he gets an offensive rebound, John Shire will be right behind me for the kick out. That's not something you can prepare for. And that's a really big strength of Duke's team, I think, right now. So going to the other national semifinal, what were your initial reactions to Butler's victory?
Well, Butler just seems to always find a way to win. They went 10 minutes without a field goal in the second half against Michigan State, and they still just pulled it out at the end of the game. You can look back to their last 4 games, really. Against Murray State, they held them without a shot in that final possession. Against Syracuse, they went on that 10-0 run at the end of the game to put away Syracuse. And against Kansas State, they just hit all of those shots at the end that Kansas State couldn't hit. And for whatever reason, no matter how ugly it looks, they just keep winning games, kind of like Michigan State did last year.
Exactly. I think it is very interesting comparing Butler playing in their hometown to Michigan State in the Final Four, to Michigan State playing in their hometown or home state last year in Detroit, in the sense that both teams are clearly not the most talented teams in the tournament, but they kept finding ways to win and winning games that most people thought they shouldn't win. And I think that's something very interesting about Butler, is last year Michigan State sort of died out in that last game against North Carolina. North Carolina really dominated that game. You almost felt as if, all the emotion was drained out. They'd done everything they could, and they didn't have anything left in the tank. And one has to wonder if that's something that's going to impact Butler as well, especially seeing, how much effort they had to put in the last game. That was a tough physical game. Their center, Matt Howard, banged his head really hard twice, had a mild concussion. He's considered a game-time decision for the national championship game, although most people are expecting him to play. Shelton Mack went out with dehydration, and they had problems with that. So it really was a tough game. And for Butler to expel so much energy and emotion into that game, you sort of have to worry about, from a Butler standpoint, whether they're going to be able to continue to have that emotion, to have that energy going in the national championship game. So looking ahead now, obviously Monday night Duke will play Butler for the national championship. What do you think the key matchup is in this game?
I think Butler's gotten here based on their perimeter defense, so that'll be interesting to see how they corral Duke's big three on the perimeter. But I think Duke's advantage is really going to come inside because, as you mentioned, Butler has 2 players taller than 6'3" in their starting lineup. And Brian Zubek, Lance Thomas, even Kyle Singler are going to have a huge size advantage against Butler, and those offensive rebounds are going to come into play for really big against Butler.
Exactly. I also think the key matchup is going to be Gordon Hayward versus Kyle Singler. There's been all this talk about how, despite playing for Butler, Hayward is the best quote-unquote pro prospect in the draft. And the interesting thing to me is he is about as similar to a Kyle Singler type player
as you could possibly get.
Exactly. He's 6'9". He can play inside. He's a great rebounder, but he likes to play in the perimeter. He's got a good shot, and he likes to sort of, take you off the dribble and do a sort of awkward shot in the lane that somehow goes in, which Kyle Singler is the master at that, is somehow getting by his man and using his height to put up a shot that doesn't look pretty but somehow goes in. I think that's going to be a very, very interesting matchup, and I would think if I'm Kyle Singler, I would want to dominate that matchup, especially since there's been all the talk about his prospects going down the drain after his, disappointing tournament and all that stuff. And with Hayward getting all the attention, I think there's going to be a little extra motivation for Singler to try to dominate that matchup. And if Hayward doesn't score, 20 points...
No one else on Butler is going to score.
Exactly. Butler doesn't have that secondary, that tertiary score. Yes, Sheldon Mack's pretty good. Matt Howard can do some things down low. But Duke does have that plethora of scoring options that they don't have. So if Singler, it may be even more important for Singler to limit Hayward to, 10, 15 points as opposed to him actually scoring. It may remind some people of his matchup against Lake Darius Dunn in the Baylor game.
Or against even Deshaun Butler in this past game.
Exactly. So I think that'll be a key matchup to watch. And again, as you mentioned, the height down low. Brian Zubek is 7'1", Matt Howard is 6'8". And again, assuming he plays. And that is a massive mismatch. Even though Howard is a very skilled player, you can't make up for that 5 inches. And against West Virginia, it was a little problematic because even though they had shorter big men, they were able to pull Zubek out to the three-point line. They were able to make their threes. Or by doing that freed up the lane. Howard, despite being undersized, is much more of a traditional big man who likes to back up, who likes to post up, that type of thing. So that's going to allow Zubek to stay down low on defense and really play as he's comfortable, which is something that he wasn't quite able to do against West Virginia despite having a good game. So all that considered, who do you think is going to win the national championship come Monday night?
I mean, I hate to jinx it, but I'm pretty sure Duke's going to win this one pretty comfortably. I kind of see this playing out like it did last year, where Michigan State got to the championship game and then was just overpowered by a superior North Carolina team. And I think Duke is that superior ACC team against Butler. I don't see it being particularly close at the end of the game.
I agree, and I think the key to this game is, like we mentioned, Butler hasn't scored the ball well at all during this tournament. And their calling card has been their defense. They're the first team in NCAA history to hold all 5 teams they've played against going up to the final game under 60 points. And when they've played teams like Syracuse and Kansas State and Michigan State, that's nothing to laugh at. But again, Duke's a team such that even if you shut down Kyle Singler, you have Nolan Smith and John Shire. Even if the big three aren't having their best day, they have the offensive rebounding that can get 6, 7, 8 points off the putbacks that you can't really account for. So that's the thing that's going to be the difference in the game, I think, is Butler may be able to shut down 2 or 3 guys, but they can't shut down all of Duke's team. And that being said, if they don't hold Duke under 60 points, they just don't have the scoring options to win, especially with Mack and Howard banged up and with all their offense really going through Gordon Hayward. So I agree. I think Duke is going to take this game. So not to jinx it, but we have 2 Chronicle writers here who think that Duke's going to win the national championship. So we'll see how it plays out on Monday. Thank you for listening to the Chronicle Sports Blog podcast, and good luck to Duke on Monday night.